Okay,
Highly.
great. Congratulations on finishing week 4.
Yay, week 4. There's only one more week left, and that's week 5. It's coming up, and this week we're going to be focusing on regulation. There's a lot of material on the regulation of Bitcoin that is literally hot off the presses. There were some new proposed regulations issued just last week by the state of New York, and we'll be discussing those and you'll be reading them. And we were really fortunate to have been visited by one of our colleagues, Scott Mainwaring,
Right.
who you'll hear from in lectures next week, who just got back from a couple of big Bitcoin regulation conferences.
Yeah, it's great. He's got a lot of good stuff to report back from that, and kind of some surprises, I think, with considering how Bitcoin is seen as this amazing new currency, how the regulations are being used to deal with it.
That's right. And you'll also see how the regulations are really trying to put Bitcoin in the position of other payment systems, like the things that you explored last week. And, a lot of you remarked in your essays that you had never really thought about the act of payment in such detail before, and thought through all the steps and processes and companies involved when you just swipe your credit card or pay online. And that's great for us to hear because that was the point of all of last week, to get you to think about payment infrastructures a little bit differently and with some complexity. Let me tell you, we're finishing up the grading of your papers, but there's a few things that we've learned about you all. Number one, you all drink a lot of energy drinks. So eat a lot of candy. You do a lot of shopping at convenience stores where you tend to use your debit card. And a humongous number of you have debit cards with Bank of America. Um, there's a little thing that came up in some of the essays, and it's partly my fault, but you still could have addressed it if you had looked into the Benson and Loftusness book. That some of you were writing about the difference between a signature debit and a PIN debit. When you use your debit card, sometimes you ask to sign, and sometimes you enter a PIN. And some of you were like, huh, what's up with that? Well, I can tell you what's up with that if you'd like to know. And again, it's in the Benson and Loftusness book. When you use a debit card, if it's also got a Visa or MasterCard logo on it, so if it's a debit card that's also a MasterCard or a Visa card, whenever you use it for debit, you have two choices: signature debit or PIN debit. Whenever you choose to use the PIN, what happens in that little point of sale box that a lot of you wrote about, they're made by Verifone or Ingenico. What's happening in that box when you choose PIN is it is routing your transaction over the debit rails, over the basically the bank's own ATM networks, things like Pulse and Star and Cirrus. But if you choose signature debit, if you choose to sign for your debit transaction, then that little box says, you know what, we're not going to route this through the ATM networks. We're going to route it through MasterCard or Visa. But it's still a debit transaction, right? It's still a debit, just like a normal debit card thing. It's not, you're not going to pay interest on it. It's not going to show up on a credit card bill, but it's going to use the infrastructure of MasterCard and Visa. Now, just for your interest, there's a couple interesting things there. From your point of view as the consumer, it's way safer to choose signature because you've got the signature backing you up if there's ever any problem. And also, even though it's not a credit card transaction but debit, you're subject to the same zero liability rules for fraudulent transactions that Visa and MasterCard have on a credit transaction. Also, your PIN is not likely to get stolen. From the merchant, though, it stinks for people to use signature debit because the interchange fee is higher. It
Yep.
costs the merchant more to do that. So it's safer for you, but costs the merchant more.
If you ever
Anyway,
get into this, if you ever end up on the merchant side, you'll be amazed at how many different categories they have for interbank fees based on card, whether you take the charge at point of sale, whether you use this rail or that rail, what bank you're using it with, all the different ways in which they try and manage risk. And as a merchant, it's amazing to see how many different ways you get billed depending on what your bank's assessment of the risk is.
right. So it's really interesting too, bringing it back to Bitcoin, to see how some of the third-party providers like Coinbase are appealing to merchants by saying, "Hey, look, we're going to simplify the whole thing. You're going to pay, what is it with Coinbase? The first $1 million of transactions is 1%, or maybe the first million is free, and then it's 1% thereafter. I forget, but you can look at their merchant page and you can see for yourself. Although there may be other fees and other risks in there, they're presenting to the merchant something that looks much cleaner, much simpler, and potentially cheaper.
Square's doing that too. On the
Yeah,
on the merchant side, Square is trying to simplify that whole fee network and saying, I think they say 2.5% no matter what card or what environment you're in.
Yep. So those are just a couple of thoughts coming out of last week and coming into this week. For this week, in terms of our discussion forums, we're not going to issue you a prompt this time. It's going to be a free-for-all. There'll be the Ask Us Anything forum, and we're going to invite you to come up with topics to discuss. The same rules apply as always. We're going to expect you to do one post by nighttime Wednesday and a second post by whatever it is. I'm forgetting right now.
11.
Nighttime
Sunday.
at 11 on Sunday. So it's the same kind of deal. You're required to do at minimum 2 posts, but you guys take the lead. We'll jump in. We'll try to steer the conversation. We'll make sure that people are there asking good questions and helping us all think together as we delve into the regulatory issues around Bitcoin. And there's one last thing, which is the final exam. The final exam is going to be an essay format final. We're going to give you 5 essay questions. You're going to have to pick 3 of those 5. And for each one, you're going to write 1 page that you're going to type up and submit via the course website. It's open note, open book, open web, open everything. But we're going to ask you the kind of questions that are going to require you to take a look at the readings again, reflect back on the lectures, maybe dig around in a particular reading and find something and talk about it and write about it. You're going to have to use your brain, not just memorize stuff ahead of time. So, don't waste your time trying to memorize every last thing that we've read. Just review the material. We'll post some study tips in this week's roadmap, and we'll send you some further instructions down the line. Here's the important bit for those of you who are planning your schedules. The exam is going to be available during a 4-day window between July 27th and July 30th. Now, we're going to email this and post this all for you so you'll have it there. It'll be open for 4 days. But the thing is, once you start it, you're only going to have 2 hours to complete it. You can't start it and stop and come back to it later. Once you start and start looking at it and go into it, you've got 2 hours. So basically, pick your day between the 27th and the 30th, pick your 2 hours, clear off your schedule, clear off some time, get all your notes together, get all the class material together, so that when you start, you'll be able to finish it within that 2-hour window.
And we're doing that to try and give you, we're doing that to actually help you a little bit so that this isn't like a 4-day final. It's 2 hours, it's limited. Right. Give it your best shot.
Right. We don't need the magnum opus, right? We just need some good, thoughtful responses to the questions that we're going to be providing you. And again, just make sure that you look ahead to your calendar between the 27th and 30th. Pick your day and pick a couple hours, and further instructions will be forthcoming. And there's one last thing, which is a Hangout this week. And Don, maybe you can say something about that.
Yeah, so on Wednesday, we're going to go online into the Matrix. And we haven't tried this before. It's an optional event. But if you're interested in joining us on Wednesday from 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. Pacific time, so that kind of lunchtime for those of you who are working or doing something else, we're going to do a live Hangout. There'll be a link posted in on the website, and what you do is you click on the link. It should open in a web browser, and we can have a live conversation for an hour, kind of like a live Ask Us Anything discussion. And so we'll give it a shot. This isn't something that we were advised to do very much in the course because of the nature of the online course and people doing things at their own time. But we wanted to give you a chance to talk with us in person as much as possible. So we're going to try that out Wednesday and play it by ear.
Yep. And we realized that, some of you are in China and Korea, one of
Yeah.
you is in Ghana. We basically have got almost all the time zones covered, but that's okay. If you can't make it, no big deal.
Yep. It's not required. Just totally drop in, say hello, ask a question in person, whatever.
Great. So enjoy the reading and lectures for this week, and we'll look forward to hopefully seeing you on Wednesday and seeing you in the forum.
Okay. Study hard. Regulation week. Woo.
Yay.